What really happened behind the velvet curtains of Golden Age Hollywood? The studios sold these women as angels, love goddesses, flappers, queens, and perfect dream girls. But away from the cameras, many of them lived with a freedom that shocked their own era. Some were punished by gossip, some became legends because of it. And some simply refused to let Hollywood, husbands, newspapers, or morality police decide how a woman should live. These are the actresses who had no limits. Clara Bow. Before Hollywood learned how to control its stars, Clara Bow arrived like a spark in a room full of curtains. She was not polished, distant, or obedient. She was alive in a way audiences could feel instantly. As the original It Girl, Bow became the face of the 1920s. Playful, restless, flirtatious, funny, and dangerously modern for an industry still trying to sell innocence. Men wanted her, women copied her, and studios made money from the exact energy they later pretended to condemn. But Clara's real life became a battlefield between freedom and judgment. Her romances, parties, friendships, and emotional struggles were turned into headline material by a press that loved building women up just to watch them fall. The more natural she seemed on screen, the more the public demanded access to her private world. Hollywood wanted her wild enough to sell tickets, but not wild enough to embarrass the machine. That contradiction is why Clara belongs here. She represented a woman before the production code, before studio morality campaigns, before publicists softened every edge. She did not just act liberated, she looked like liberation itself. And in old Hollywood, that was both her magic and her curse. Louise Brooks. Louise Brooks did not simply enter Hollywood. She looked at it, understood its rules, and walked away before it could fully own her. With her sharp black bob, unreadable eyes, and cool detachment, Brooks became one of cinema's most unforgettable symbols of female danger. She did not perform innocence. She performed knowledge. That alone made her different from the soft, obedient heroines Hollywood preferred. Her most legendary work came not from playing safe, but from embodying women who moved through desire, danger, and social punishment without apology. In films like Pandora's Box, she carried a kind of modern sexuality that felt decades ahead of its time. She was not begging the audience to forgive her character. She was daring them to understand her. Off-screen, Brooks was just as difficult for the system to control. She rejected the usual Hollywood obedience, refused to flatter powerful men, and damaged her career by choosing independence over submission. Many stars were ruined by scandal. Brooks was different. She seemed almost uninterested in being saved by fame. That is why her legend only grew stronger after Hollywood moved on. Louise Brooks became the actress people rediscovered later, and realized she was not behind her time. She was ahead of everybody else. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow looked like a studio fantasy carved out of platinum light, but the life behind that image was much darker than the posters suggested. Hollywood presented her as the original blonde bombshell, playful, glamorous, teasing, and impossible to ignore. She had the voice, the timing, the confidence, and the look that made audiences feel they were watching something slightly forbidden, even when the script was pretending to behave. But Harlow's stardom came with a heavy cost. Her private life became one of the most sensational stories of early Hollywood, especially after the shocking death of her husband, Paul Byrne. The scandal did not just surround her, it followed her like a shadow. Newspapers picked at her grief, studios tried to manage the damage, and the public became obsessed with the contrast between the laughing woman on screen and the wounded woman off screen. What made Harlow so powerful was that she never felt cold or artificial. Beneath the glamour, there was warmth. Beneath the image, there was vulnerability. She could play desire without losing humor, and she could be bold without becoming hard. Her life was short, but her impact was enormous. Jean Harlow proved that Hollywood's bad girl image could be tragic, magnetic, and deeply human all at once. Hedy Lamarr. Hedy Lamarr was treated by Hollywood as a face so beautiful it almost became a prison. Studios looked at her and saw glamour, mystery, and sensual perfection. But before she became an American screen goddess, she had already shocked Europe with Ecstasy, a film whose sensual reputation followed her for the rest of her life. Hollywood did not create her scandalous image. It inherited it, polished it, and then tried to control it. Lamarr's beauty made people underestimate her, but her life refused to fit the simple fantasy. She married several times, moved through powerful circles, escaped a controlling marriage, reinvented herself across continents, and carried an intelligence far beyond the roles she was usually offered. While audiences saw an untouchable goddess, the real Hetty was a restless survivor, glamorous, complicated, and unwilling to remain trapped in anyone else's version of her. Her romantic history made headlines, but her larger story is about ownership. Men wanted to possess her image. Studios wanted to package it. The public wanted to stare at it. But Lamar kept slipping out of every box. That is what makes her perfect for this list. Hedy Lamarr was not just beautiful without limits. She was intelligent, ambitious, unpredictable, and far more dangerous to Hollywood's expectations than they ever admitted. Gloria Graham. Gloria Graham had the kind of voice that sounded like trouble before the story even began. In film noir, she was electric, soft but sharp, wounded but dangerous, the woman in the room who seemed to know more than she was saying. Hollywood loved using her as a symbol of temptation, but Graham's real life eventually became even more controversial than the characters she played. Her career had prestige. She won an Academy Award and became one of noir's most memorable women. But her private life drew relentless attention, especially after her controversial marriage to Anthony Ray, the son of her former husband, director Nicholas Ray. Even by Hollywood standards, that story became explosive. It fed gossip columns, damaged reputations, and turned Graham into a figure surrounded by whispers. Yet reducing her to scandal would miss the point. Graham's screen power came from emotional contradiction. She could look fragile and calculating in the same glance. She could make desire feel like a trap, and vulnerability feel like a weapon. That is why her performances still linger. Gloria Graham fits this topic because she lived at the edge of respectability, both on-screen and off. Hollywood often punished women for that edge. But in her case, the edge became the legend. Barbara Payton. Barbara Payton's story is not just scandalous. It is one of the bleakest warnings in Hollywood history. She arrived with beauty, confidence, and real promise. For a brief moment, she looked like someone the studios could turn into a major star. She had the face, the presence, and the public fascination. But Hollywood can be merciless when fascination turns into judgment. Payton became famous not only for acting, but for a stormy personal life that the press devoured. Her relationships, especially the violent public conflict involving actors Franchot Tone and Tom Neal, turned her into headline material almost overnight. The scandal was dramatic, messy, and impossible for Hollywood to ignore. But unlike male stars, who were often forgiven for chaos, Payton paid heavily for hers. Her decline became part of the myth. A promising actress swallowed by bad choices, cruel publicity, addiction, and an industry that treated damaged women as disposable. There is a sadness behind her name because her story feels less like rebellion and more like destruction happening in public. Still, she belongs on this list because her life shows the brutal side of no limits. Sometimes Hollywood sold wildness as glamour. Sometimes it watched a woman collapse under the weight of it. Barbara Payton became both spectacle and tragedy. Lupe Velez. Lupe Velez did not enter a scene quietly. She arrived like a flame, and Hollywood never quite knew whether to celebrate her or fear her. Known for her explosive energy, comic timing, and fiery screen personality, Velez became one of the most vivid stars of early sound cinema. Studios often reduced her to stereotypes, but even inside limited roles, she had a force that could not be contained. Her private life became just as public as her performances. Her romance with Gary Cooper was famously intense, stormy, and endlessly discussed. Newspapers loved portraying her as passionate and unpredictable, sometimes fairly, often cruelly. Like many women of her era, Velez was praised for excitement on screen, but punished when that same emotional intensity appeared in real life. What made her unforgettable was not just scandal, it was vitality. She seemed incapable of becoming dull. Every public appearance, every role, every romantic story added to the idea that Lupe Velez lived at full volume. Hollywood liked women who could be controlled, softened, and reshaped. Velez resisted that simply by being herself. Her ending was tragic, and the myths around it have often been distorted. But the real legacy is stronger. Lupe Velez was bold, funny, sensual, and alive in a way Hollywood could exploit, but never fully tame. Lana Turner. Lana Turner's life sounds like it was written by a gossip columnist with a taste for melodrama. Discovered as a teenager and transformed into one of Hollywood's great glamour icons, Turner became the kind of star who seemed made for flashbulbs, whispers, and dramatic close-ups. Her beauty was not quiet. It was polished, expensive, and dangerous. The kind of beauty that made scandal feel inevitable. Her romantic life became legendary. With multiple marriages, high-profile relationships, heartbreaks, and public drama, Turner seemed to live permanently under a spotlight. But the most shocking chapter came with the killing of gangster Johnny Stompanato by her daughter Cheryl Crane during a violent confrontation. The case became one of the most sensational Hollywood scandals of the 20th century, turning Turner's private nightmare into national obsession. What makes Lana fascinating is how she survived it. Many stars would have disappeared. Turner returned, rebuilt, and kept the image alive. She understood glamour as armor. She wore it even when the world knew what was underneath. Lana Turner fits this list because her life was never simply romantic or scandalous. It was cinematic. Every rise, fall, marriage, headline, and comeback felt like another scene in a movie Hollywood could never have dared to script honestly. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth was sold to the world as the love goddess, but that title became both her crown and her cage. On screen, she was dazzling. The hair, the smile, the movement, the kind of presence that made audiences believe glamour could be dangerous. In Gilda, one toss of her hair became a cultural event. Hollywood did not just photograph Rita, it turned her into a fantasy. But the woman behind the fantasy was far more vulnerable than the image allowed. Her marriages, including relationships with Orson Welles and Prince Ali Khan, kept her in the public eye. Newspapers treated her love life like a continuing drama, while the studio system benefited from the very attention that made her private happiness harder to protect. The tragedy of Hayworth is that she was desired more than she was understood. Men projected dreams onto her. Studios projected profit. Audiences projected mystery. But Rita herself often seemed trapped inside the image that made her famous. That is why she belongs here. Her life had glamour, romance, scandal, and reinvention, but also a deep sadness beneath the shine. Rita Hayworth showed how old Hollywood could turn a woman into a symbol so powerful that even she struggled to escape it. Ingrid Bergman. Ingrid Bergman's scandal was not built on wild parties or a reckless public image. That is what made it so explosive. She had been sold as noble, graceful, pure, and almost untouchable. Audiences saw her as the woman from Casablanca, the dignified European star with seriousness in her eyes. Then came Roberto Rossellini, and Hollywood's moral mask cracked wide open. Her affair with the Italian director, while both were still married to other people, became one of the biggest scandals of the 1950s. The backlash was fierce. Bergman was denounced in public, attacked by moral campaigners, and temporarily pushed out of American Hollywood. The outrage revealed something important. Audiences could forgive male stars for complicated lives, but a woman associated with purity was expected to remain pure forever. What makes Bergman's story powerful is that she survived the storm with dignity. She did not vanish permanently. She rebuilt her career, won again, and forced time to soften the judgment that once seemed so absolute. Ingrid Bergman belongs on this list because her no limits moment challenged the fantasy Hollywood had built around her. She chose passion over public approval, and for that, an entire industry tried to make an example of her. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe was not merely a star. She was the dream Hollywood sold when it wanted desire to look innocent. Her breathy voice, glowing face, comic timing, and carefully crafted vulnerability made her one of the most famous women who ever lived. But the world's obsession with Marilyn was never only about movies. It was about the private life people imagined behind the blonde image. Her relationships with Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller turned her into a public contradiction. The sex symbol married first to a baseball legend, then to a celebrated intellectual. Rumors, headlines, and powerful associations followed her constantly, creating a mythology that often swallowed the real woman. Hollywood wanted her available, desirable, and childlike. The public wanted her tragic, romantic, and endlessly mysterious. But Marilyn was not just a victim of image. She fought for better roles, challenged studio control, studied acting seriously, and tried to build an identity beyond the dumb blonde stereotype. That fight made her more than a symbol. It made her a woman pushing against the cage built from her own fame. Marilyn belongs near the top because no Golden Age actress became a larger battlefield between desire and humanity. She lived under impossible attention, and even now, the world is still trying to separate the woman from the fantasy. Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner looked like trouble dressed in elegance. She had the face of a goddess, the voice of a woman who had heard every lie, and the attitude of someone who did not care whether Hollywood approved. Unlike stars who carefully performed rebellion, Ava seemed genuinely uninterested in behaving. That made her irresistible to audiences and terrifying to publicists. Her marriages alone became Hollywood legend: Mickey Rooney, Artie Shaw, and Frank Sinatra. Each relationship added another layer to the myth. But it was her romance with Sinatra that became the great storm. Passionate, destructive, glamorous, and impossible for gossip columns to resist. They were two enormous personalities colliding in public, and Hollywood watched every spark. Ava's power came from refusing to act like a fragile screen ornament. She drank, loved, argued, traveled, and spoke with a bluntness that made her feel dangerous, in a world built on carefully rehearsed smiles. She could be glamorous without seeming obedient, sensual without seeming manufactured, and vulnerable without asking for pity. That is why she ranks so high. Ava Gardner did not simply play women with no limits. She lived like someone who knew the cost of freedom and chose it anyway. Hollywood tried to frame her as scandal. She became legend instead. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo is one of the rare stars whose mystery became more powerful than any scandal. She did not need public chaos to fascinate the world. Her silence did the work. Her distance did the work. Her refusal to be fully known turned her into one of Hollywood's most hypnotic figures. On screen, Garbo carried an erotic gravity unlike almost anyone else. She could look at another actor and make the room feel secret. Her performances suggested hidden longing, private pain, and emotional danger beneath perfect stillness. Off-screen, her private life was guarded so fiercely that speculation became part of her mythology. Her relationships, friendships, and rumored romantic attachments have been discussed for decades, especially because Garbo resisted the clean public narratives Hollywood liked to give its stars. What made her radical was withdrawal. In an industry built on exposure, Garbo chose disappearance. She walked away from Hollywood while still legendary, and spent the rest of her life avoiding the machine that wanted to keep using her image. That kind of control was rare. Many actresses on this list were punished for being too visible. Garbo did the opposite. She became untouchable by making herself unavailable. Her no-limits story is not loud. It is icy, private, and unforgettable. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich did not ask Hollywood for permission to be provocative. She arrived already dangerous. With her smoky voice, sharp cheekbones, tailored suits, and cool stare, Dietrich blurred lines that old Hollywood preferred to keep strict. She played with masculinity and femininity, glamour and distance, desire and control. She did not simply look modern. She looked like the future had arrived early and was bored by everyone else. Her image was famously bold. She wore trousers when that still carried shock value, projected androgynous elegance, and became an icon for audiences who saw in her something freer than ordinary screen glamour. Her romantic life also became part of the legend, with biographers and historians often discussing her relationships with both men and women. But what made Dietrich different was that scandal rarely seemed to weaken her. She made ambiguity feel like power. She was also politically courageous, openly opposing Nazi Germany and supporting Allied troops during World War II. That gave her rebellion moral weight, beyond the bedroom gossip attached to her name. Dietrich belongs at number 2, because she controlled provocation like an art form. She did not stumble into scandal. She styled it, sharpened it, and turned it into identity. In a town obsessed with rules, Marlene Dietrich made rule-breaking look sophisticated. Tallulah Bankhead. If old Hollywood had a warning label, Tallulah Bankhead would have laughed at it, signed it, and worn it like jewelry. She was not simply bold for her time. She was volcanic. Her voice, wit, appetite for attention, and refusal to behave made her one of the most outrageous personalities of the Golden Age. While other actresses hid behind studio-approved romance stories, Tallulah turned scandal into performance. Her reputation was legendary. Wild parties, sharp remarks, unconventional relationships, and a private life that gossip writers could barely keep up with. She was linked to men and women, spoke with a freedom that shocked polite society, and treated respectability like a boring costume someone else had chosen for her. Hollywood's moral guardians did not know what to do with a woman who seemed impossible to shame. But Tallulah was not just a scandal machine. She was a serious stage actress with charisma powerful enough to dominate a room before she even finished a sentence. Her danger came from intelligence as much as appetite. She knew exactly what people said about her, and often turned the joke back on them. That is why she takes number 1. Tallulah Bankhead did not merely live with no limits. She made limitation itself look ridiculous. In an era built on control, she was the woman control could never quite catch. The Golden Age loved pretending its stars were perfect, but perfection was often just another studio costume. Behind the glamour were women who wanted passion, control, escape, power, privacy, and pleasure on their own terms. Some were punished, some were mythologized, some were misunderstood for decades, but each of them exposed the same truth. Hollywood could create an image, but it could not always control the woman inside it. Which actress shocked you the most? Comment below.